Okay, so we've got the BMW E84 X1 2010 model, and I thought I'd show you guys a few things that might help you if you were thinking about doing it. So, interesting sort of details on this car is it was originally, the dealer had it as a demo car, and then I think it had another owner after that who cared for it, and then my family got this car after that, and we've kept a full service history on it, but also in between the services doing other little service items just to top it up as well. One thing that I've read about these is that they need every at least 10,000 miles or every year do an oil change. Some people do them more frequently than that, because there is a known issue with the timing chain that they I think it's more the little plastic guides alongside the timing chain can go, but actually if you keep the engine well maintained then it should last the lifetime of the car. So few things that I've done on this: I refurbished the alloys using Worth paint. I used their silver alloy paint, which actually I researched that Worth I think is the supplier of BMW paints anyway, and then I used their lacquer. Now I think the paint is actually a match, but the lacquer is hard from a rattle can to get that perfect shine afterwards. I replaced the hubcaps as well with a second-hand set that I got on eBay. Originals, I wouldn't use the non-originals. I think that they probably look crap, but they seem to have a problem with the centre caps, that they corrode, so I actually put a coat of lacquer on those. These are just little 3D printed TPU nut caps that I made. They're flexible filament. I don't know, just looks fine. I actually replaced the locking wheel nut on all of them, because they are just known to get stuck. I actually had one get stuck, which was a bit annoying, but I did get it off at a local garage. Also got the BMW valve caps, whether you like it or not, £16 for a set. So other things in terms of the paintwork, I used Built Hamber medium clay bar after washing it. I tend to use Maguire's car wash, the purple stuff. In fact, actually, probably easiest to just show you what I've got. So we've got Maguire's car wash, and then I've got Built Hamber auto clay medium. So you do that afterwards, and that takes off a lot of tar deposits. And I actually used a machine to G3 compound the paint, because it hadn't had that love for a while. And then I found this was really fantastic for getting rid of swirl marks, so I did that next. And then I used Built Hamber finish wax, and this has got a really high carnauba content. It's bloody expensive, but it's good. I tend to use Built Hamber Carousel for the wheels, just to help break down. It has it creates a reaction which is safe for alloy wheels. It's also safe for diamond cut wheels as well, and it goes purple on reaction, smells funky, and takes some of that crap off. And then I tend to use either Auto Glim or Maguire's Tire Shine stuff. But yeah, so that's what I used. Get back out here. So a few other things, let's have a look. So in terms of the seats, I used a leather paint, and actually so I use Sonax to clean the seats. So Sonax makes this really lovely, it's called like the ultimate leather kit, and it has like a little brush in it and a foam cleaner, and it really takes up crap that was on here. My mum used to use it for the allotment, this car, and it had a lot of mud in there, but no damage, just dirt. I steam cleaned along here as well with a little steamer, a Bissell one, spot cleaner. Pulled the seats forward, vacuumed under the seats, found a baby bell, wax, luckily not in the carpet, and then used a Bissell carpet cleaner to clean the carpet. I did 2 rounds because it was particularly muddy. But yeah, after the seats are cleaned, you can then use the leather colourant, and this leather is oyster colour. I also did, let's have a look. So resprayed this bumper. It had been done by BMW when we bought it, but it was just not fantastic. So used actually Halford's Arctic Silver BMW paint, and actually I think that looks pretty good. No lacquer on that because it was already a matte finish. And inside here, refurbished the steering wheel with a bit of black leather paint, and then you sponge it on right in here. So I gave it a good clean first, obviously, and there was a lot of just dirt in the stitching. And then afterwards I did a little bit of very fine grit sandpaper, so wet sanding it. It does, when it first came on it was a bit sticky. It's actually settled down now. You lose some of the grain, but it was already very worn, but I think it looks good. There was a tiny spider stuck in the cluster and got him out. Replaced the start stop button just because it was a bit worn, so got a genuine second-hand one. And as you can see, I did the lever on the handbrake and the gear stick as well. This is just how I've wired my phone in. I don't want to get one of those heads-up displays. I feel like your phone, if I get my phone out, can sit just there and do everything that you need. So it connects into there. I've got a little splitter and it goes down. Honestly, those head units that people buy not secondhand, on eBay or what have you, they look like the bells and whistles, but the actual RAM inside them is always really poor, so they tend to crash and all that stuff. So nightmare. The only thing I haven't got is reverse camera. That would be nice, but it's such a pain in the ass to wire those in when I've done it before. I also had a little scuff on here that I did when I was moving the seats. Got this second hand on eBay for 15 quid, which is nice. Built like a tank, as the Germans. In the back, as you can see, the back has barely ever been used. I was missing one of the Isofix covers, so I 3D printed that in ABS. So also quite a common thing is this is made from plastic on the originals, actually rubber, that degrades and it just snaps. So I got that on AliExpress. So yeah, sorry, I go back to this bit. I don't know if you can see it there. This I got on AliExpress to put my sunglasses in. Yay! I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so now to the juicy bits. So aside from the timing chain sits at the very back, there's no problem with it in this car. You can actually, if you poke your eye into where the oil goes in, you can see it. But from what I've read, I would gather that if you keep the car well maintained with regular oil changes, at least every 10,000 miles or every year, it should last the lifetime of the engine. And this car has not been thrashed. It literally was my mum's car to just poodle around in, very well cared for, and I drive like a granny anyway. So it's got 132,000 miles on it so far, and it's had a few minor sort of things to be expected, but otherwise doing really well. But when I received it, I noticed that on startup there was a high screech coming from the belts. You know, that kind of, sometimes you hear cars go by and you can hear it and you know that it's something to do with the belt slipping or what have you. Anyway, and I'd read up that you guys on the group had said about the camshaft pulley cracking. So this is rubber here to almost, I guess, dampen the vibrations of the force that's coming through. And this one is the main one that drives all of the rest of these pulleys. So just to let everyone know, because I didn't know. And but you've got your alternator, you've got the compressor for the air conditioning. This is the tensioner. This is, I think, called the harmonic one or something. Anyway, this is the water pump. I can't remember what that one is. Don't know. Someone will say, I'm sure. You've got here is the engine gas regulator cooler. That's the engine gas regulator valve, which I'll talk about later. You've got obviously your air filter and stuff there. And these are all pipes of part of the coolant system. So yeah, the first thing that we found that was when I looked at this, there was cracking all alongside there. So we decided to replace that first. And actually, in the process of taking the belts off, we had a little play with some of the pulleys and could feel that some of the bearings were gone. So we thought, well, not gone, but going. And so all in all, what we have done is, so if I kind of talk you through, and I'll show you the pictures of when we got to doing the water pump and stuff. But in order to release the tension on the belt, you put your ratchet on here, and then you go clockwise, because if this bolt, so it's a counter, I don't know what they call it, but it goes the opposite way of any other sort of bolt would go, because otherwise, if it went the traditional way as the belt runs round, I would imagine it would loosen the bolt, and that would be really shit for everyone. So when you've got the ratchet on it, you go clockwise, and that puts tension on this, so it grips on it. You're not going to undo the bolt because it's a reverse thread, and then it causes this to move forward, kind of rotate, and then you can pull the belt off. Now there is a little pin right in here that you can put in to lock it. Just be careful that pin doesn't break. I guess like a tent peg would probably be the right diameter and strength, but you do not want anything breaking in there. So once it was off, we replaced this. This was actually pretty straightforward. Now the trouble is that when you are undoing the bolts here, when you're applying the force, this will want to rotate, so you need to go underneath the car and put a little pin into, now I didn't do this bit, but there was a little hole that you can then lock the mechanism so that the force that you apply to these bolts will actually go into the bolts and not just cause the pulley to rotate. Now in order to get access to that, BMWs have, I wonder if I can, they've got all of this undercover tray which helps stop it corroding and stuff. There's about 20 bolts to take it off. I would recommend taking the bolts, leave some of the ones on the front, and then do the back ones last. The front ones last, so that this doesn't flap down on your face when you're pulling it out. Pro tip. You will need to lift the car up to do this, and we found that actually underneath the wheel arch here, you've got the kind of wishbone kind of arm things that head off to the wheels. That's a good place to mount the jacks. I'll show some pictures of that as well. And then yeah, you take that tray out, and that means you can get under the car and then put that little bolt in to lock it. When you buy this, the bolts should come with it because they are single use, and I think the way that they work is that when you put torque on them, it creates like a compression force that, yeah, you wouldn't want to use them again. And the torque on those, I I can't remember, but I used, you torque them up to a certain amount, and then it actually talks about using an angle torque, if I remember correctly, where you go via a certain amount of degrees. You need a special tool for that, but it's not absolutely necessary if you just want to torque it up to whatever you read to be the kind of standard one. So yeah, interestingly, when I was spinning this, I found that there was a bit of a squeak when I rotate it anti-clockwise. So I do think that the bearings in the alternator are worn, but when we put a voltmeter on the alternator and rev the car and everything, it's not dropping in voltage, so it's still working absolutely fine. It might be an idea to get that reconditioned, but in order to do that, you can't use your car for a bit. So anyway, I'm not worried about it at the moment. So the other things that we did is replaced the tensioner, the harmonic one over here, and I do have some pictures of the parts that we used that interestingly, they are BMW parts. The factory that makes them, though, if they're not selling them through BMW, they actually scratch off the logo of BMW and you can see it on them. I've got some pictures of that I'll add in. So much cheaper, but still the same thing. So yeah, the other thing is we got a Continental belt. That's the last thing you put on, but we wanted to change the water pump. And what the water pump is, you've got the hoses here that go into it. This is the thermostat, I gather, and that's the rotating bit that pumps the water around. And actually, before I did all of that, I took this off and gave this a little clean, the EGR valve, because that's known to have problems, and it was a little sooty, and put that back on. But a little bit of coolant leaked out when I did that, because I had to take this pipe off, undo nut here and back there. And this bit of plastic, I learnt this the hard way, actually you need to pull it up that way, do not try and pry it that way, and I cracked it a little bit, but anyway, it's fine. So you can actually keep that on the vehicle. I seem to find it quite hard to get this clip off. I thought I was going to break it, so I kept it on the vehicle. Anyway, so in order to do the water pump, you're going to need to release some of the coolant. Well, all of it. You're going to have to get it all out, otherwise it's just a big mess. So let's go into that a little bit more detail. So when the car was still warm, now just be warned, you do not want to be taking any hoses or anything off when the car is hot. The coolant will be very hot and you'll get burnt. I haven't done that because yeah, I didn't do that, but yeah, don't do that. I'm sure someone has done it at some point and really hurt themselves. So basically you've got the big old radiator here, but actually underneath there's a smaller kind of little radiator. Can't remember what that one is separated for, but anyway. And then this is the cold, and this was the hot, and I remember when actually you could feel it, it was warm. So you've got the coolant getting cooled by the radiator, it's nice and cold, goes through here, gets pumped around the system, and then it goes around all the little nooks and crannies, the little caves of the engine. You've got your EGR cooler, all of these bits, and it helps keep the engine cool, which is why it's so important that you don't have a coolant leak. I'm not a pro in this, I'm learning, but if you don't have coolant in the car will overheat, and then very quickly you'll get warping of the engine block and things like that. Just badness. So what we actually did is we took this one off first and had a bucket underneath. Remember, you've removed this tray, so you can do that, and it just squirted out coolant everywhere. And then yeah, took the clips off. These have got, you put a little flathead in there and ping the clip backwards. It's really nice design, and then you can pop those pipes off. The pipes are actually perfectly fine, there was no cracks in them or anything, but we decided to replace them because we used to have a BMW 5 Series that did blow a pipe, and it was really bad news. So this is just preventative. So yeah, I don't know, I might sell those other pipes or just keep them as spares because they are still perfectly functioning. Anyway, so now once we got those pipes out of the way, you would think that getting this off would be easy. It's actually not. The only thing that's, I mean, it's easy if you know how, but there are, I think there's 8 bolts for the water pump, and there's one that sits right up in here, and this gets in the way, this little regulator thing. So actually what we did is we unbolted the EGR cooler. So you've got bolt here, here, and in there and there. You can, if you wanted to, pop this out of the way. I don't think we did. And anyway, it meant that we could pull it forward and get a bit more access. And we, in order to get that bolt, actually we had to remove this part first, which we were replacing anyway. But now we were lucky we had a tiny little spanner, but there is a bolt that sits backwards just in here. So there's 2 bolts on the front, 1 on the back in there, and you need the tiniest micro spanner because it can't be too long, because otherwise you hit the alternator and you'd have to take the alternator out the way. And it fit in there. I'm going to show you some pictures of that. And remember, when you are taking that bolt off, you are going counterclockwise. And actually, if you have a bit of a brain fart like I did, I was actually tightening the bolt at first. So you take those off that way. And interestingly, when we took it off, we saw, so you can see a little bit of the head gasket there, little rounded bit of metal in here. And there was a tiny little bit of coolant, not around the gasket, but actually around the water pump parts here. And it wasn't severe, but what it had done is, the way the coolant crystallizes, is it had started to push the gasket out of the way. I'm going to show you because it shows it better. Okay, so yeah, to show you what I mean, so this is that little pump bracket thing, and you can see where some of the coolant has just seeped out, and it actually means that you lose that lovely rubberized gasket texture against the aluminium block. You could by all means stick this in an ultrasonic cleaner and bring it back to life and it'd be absolutely fine, but I probably will do that and then have it as a spare. And interestingly, you can see on the water pump as well, similar sort of thing going on here. It just means it's not as supple there. Again, you could take it off and clean this up. You've actually got a little tab here that you can pull it out. Best way I recommend doing it is sticking it in a hot ultrasonic bath. And there's the other gasket sitting on there. But yeah, nice and fresh and clean. It's actually not bad at all. And this was the original belt. It's been on for the lifetime of the car and absolutely no problems with it. We replaced it with a Continental one, and just so if anyone wants to know, A, put it on the way around that it comes in the packaging, and B, on the Continental belt it will be the grey side that is in contact with the pulleys. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the other pipes and stuff that we've taken off, they are absolutely fine, but I don't know, preventative medicine, that's what I do as my job. Oh, so these are little shims that you need. That so if you look at the water pump when you take it off, it has these little guide shims that sit in just 2 of the holes. And I think this helps make this align perfectly up against the block. We didn't have them, so I had to go on a mission to BMW who had them in stock, and they're about 70p each. But yeah, definitely worth having. They really ought to give it with the part when you buy it, but they didn't. Anyway, so back to the car. So yeah, once you've got this out of the way, and remember that tiny little spanner that you'll need to get in that gap, then you can pull this forward, and then you've got access to that other bolt. Torque values, I think they were about 10 or something. but yeah, you can look them up nice and easily, and I think I took pictures of them. So yeah, and then once everything was all, you know, put back on and stuff, I did actually clean a bit of that leaked coolant off the block with a bit of fine grit sandpaper. Interestingly, when this was off, I could see a bit sooty in there, but nothing too bad. So yeah, and then you put the belt back on. There are belt diagrams, and I'll include that in the pictures as well. You've got to make sure you put it on the right way. And I found the best way of putting it back on, and I think it's probably designed this way, is have the belt wrapped around all of the pulleys bar this nice little slippery one, and then when you do the ratchet trick thing again, it will slide on much easier. You just haven't got enough give on a new belt as well to get it over these ridges. So, and try and keep them all centered, but generally I would imagine that it centers itself once it starts going as well. But just make sure before you start the engine that all the ridges are lined up. So yeah, and I guess the only other thing I didn't say is how you actually access this bit. So to get into here, and it's worth having a look if you've got one of these or if you're buying one, you've got a little hex bolt here, here and here. If you get yourself a Halford's toolkit, you'll be able to get it off. So you just literally then pull that forward and it pops off that little bit into the air filter, and then obviously taking the engine cover off. But so with that all replaced, the squeal went actually when we did the crank pulley, and also we did these two at the same time, so I think it probably was the crank pulley. And the car is actually much quieter, so yeah, in fact actually, why don't we start her up and then I can show you how quiet she is. So this is a cold start. She's been sitting here as I've been obviously talking and giving her a little spruce. What I might do is move the microphone a bit closer. So yeah, I mean, all in all, it's looking pretty good. I think it's actually handy to have a video of how your car sounds with a good microphone, so that if something changes you can compare it. So I'm going to use this as a guide for myself as well for the future. But yeah, next things that we hope to do on it will be, I need to sort out the washer fluid sensor is playing up, and I'm sure that won't be too difficult. It's just a faff getting in there. I've already had a go, but it's too cold at the moment. And a couple of other things that I'd like to do is there's some little bit of minor wear on the rear suspension parts, which I'll get some work done on those. But all in all, she's looking good, and I hope that that video helps you guys as well, because it's a bit limited how much data is out there, and the Haynes manual, although useful, it's not as useful as they used to be. I have bought it for like torque values and things like that, but the diagrams tend to be just generic cars and not as specific as they used to be for, you know, they used to have loads of photos in them, which was nice. But yeah, I hope you guys find that helpful. Okay, so the other thing that I forgot to talk about as I was putting it all away is actually retopping up the coolant, because once you connect all your pipes you've lost a load of coolant in the process, and hopefully the pictures show a bit more detail. But so my understanding is you can't have bubbles in the coolant system because they can get locked in all the little nooks and crannies, and then that means that air creates a block there, and then the coolant doesn't pass and flow in a orderly manner, and then your engine isn't cooled properly and you get problems then of overheating. So there is a method that a lot of people talk about on YouTube about how you can utilize the car's water pump to actually push the fluid around the system and bleed it. But apparently the way that BMW would do it, and most reputable garages, is to actually create a vacuum. And that's what you'll see in the photos that we've got, where you empty all the fluid out, which we've already done, and then you attach an air compressor with a special little valve system on it with a pressure gauge, and then switching on that vacuum, the compressor, it creates a vacuum which draws all the air out of the system, and you will see the pipes, like these ones down here, these big fat ones, they will depress, that's the word, collapse inwards, and then once that is reached a certain amount of pressure, and effectively it's negative pressure, you can then utilize that vacuum to then draw up your mix of coolant. The coolant that we used was a 50-50 mix with this stuff. I actually had quite a bit left over, and you want to do this with the car still raised up on the jack, because you want air to rise towards the front end of the vehicle. And then also we had the bucket of coolant raised up to hopefully the same level as the reservoir, and actually it's quite funky when it does it, it just sucks it all through. And then what we did is we did a bit of bleeding procedure where you warm up the car, rev it a few times, you've got the bleed valve here, but actually there really wasn't that much air that came through, and I do think that's a superior way of doing it. It took us a bit of time to do it because we hadn't done it in a while. Well, I've never done it, but actually if we were to do it now, it would probably take you 10-15 minutes, so it's definitely something worth investing in if you plan on doing those supplement sort of service and works yourself, and certainly if you're doing anything on this cooling system, which, as we've seen, you can preempt problems there. So yeah, and what I actually did is I drove it home, and then the next day when the car was cold, I took this off. I'm not going to do it now because I've just run it and it might be a bit hot and it could splash you in the face. Never ever open that if it is hot, and always wear gloves and eye protection. A dash of that in your eye and you might be blind. So and then I just topped it up a little bit with my premix that I've got, and I will check that regularly. And the other thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye out is looking for any of those little stains of coolant leak. Good places to look that I know other people have talked about is down by the radiator as well. There was a guy recently who had a coolant leak on a 2018 model BMW just beneath the water pump, so it probably is the water pump that's the problem. So this can happen to any car of any age, so just keep an eye out on it. And certainly if you've got this E84, just take this off, it's really easy, and have a little look, get a good torch and have a hunt, and then you'll hopefully preempt major problems. Now, just to let you guys know, in total the parts have probably come to, I would say somewhere about £800, and these are, we've gone for genuine BMW parts. Obviously Continental Belt isn't genuine BMW, but it definitely is worth your weight in gold to get the best quality parts that you can get. Don't skimp on that. But I would imagine if we were to have this done by BMW, you'd be looking at an hourly fee of mechanic work for £160 to £185 is what my local place is per hour. So, you know, yes, it's taken us a fair bit of time to do it. I would say all in all, it took us probably 12 to 16 hours for everything. Now, we staged this over 2 days, and that's because we had a little hiccup with missing some parts, and also taking our time to make sure we get it right, and a lot of pre-work in looking up torque values, researching how you do it. But I really hope that this helps someone. It's not for the faint-hearted. You do need a good set of tools, and as I say, that micro spanner, if we hadn't had it, we would have been effed. But yeah, you know, if you've got a good garage with bits and bobs and you're confident doing these things, then yeah, you can absolutely give it a go. I am a complete novice, I would say, at car stuff, but a quick learner, and I already feel confident that I could probably do it on my own, but I'd say it's always better to have someone else there for moral support. But yeah, no, hope that helps. Okay, here's that little bit on the EGR valve, just having it in situ. This is actually it cleaned. You can see that there's still a tiny bit of carbon deposits, and you could probably take it off the engine to put it in ultrasonic cleaner, but I was finding it hard to get that little retainer clip off for the electrics, so I did it in situ. I think this is when it was dirty. I put a little bit of kind of blue tack on the end there where the pipe came off, just to stop it leaking. So yeah. Okay, so the next load of pictures is just pictures I took whilst we were doing the work on changing some of those, the water pump, the belt, and the coolant. So first off, you've got to get the car jacked up at the front. Try and have it on a level ground if you can. Can't say that this driveway is that level, but it's what we've used for many years. So there are a few points on the car that are probably safest to help jack it up. You've obviously got the plastic box that you use to jack the car up, but you can see here, this is where we put the axle stand, so it's that kind of little wishbone area under the front, on both sides of the wheels. I think I've taken a few more pictures just to show that in more detail. And this is what it looks like when you take that engine cover off. It's got so many bolts, it's right pain in the ass to get off, but it does help protect the underside from salt from the roads. So the next picture is those parts I was telling you that are actually BMW use the same ones, but this manufacturer, if they're not sold through BMW, they actually scratch off the logo for BMW and you can see it. So that's the brand to go for if you want to get the same quality. And this was my crankshaft pulley before I took it off. We've got a comparison of new and old. They are exactly the same, and as the BMW genuine ones, made in the same factory, just they scratched the logo off. You can kind of see it on that picture, just where the barcode is. They've scratched off where BMW would be. So it's just nice to see there. Again, another shot of that. This is just the engine bay. Always like to have a little look before you get started, just to remember where everything is. It's good to have a reference point. So you've got the radiator fan there. I've taken that little vent out of the way so you can see. Again, just a few more views. And you can actually see the pipes were in very good condition. This car probably would have gone on absolutely fine with the ones that were there, but we've had experiences before where they have blown, degraded, and we felt it was good preventative care to get those rectified. So this is actually a shot. I can see the under tray is still on in this picture. But yeah, it's amazing how clean this car is considering it's well over 10 years old. It hasn't been thrashed or anything like that. So this is now where we've taken that first pipe off on the cool end, and we've got the bucket underneath to catch that coolant as it comes out. Please wash that away. It is lethal to cats and probably other wildlife. And you can see why you'd want that under tray off, because it will splash all over it. And you must remember to wash that away. Don't leave it on your car. It's very corrosive to paintwork. And it's just not nice stuff to have hanging around, but we left it at that point because we were going to make more mess. And you can see the little clips, how you put a little flathead in there and it just helps open that clip, and then you can take the pipe off. There's an M on the pipe, whether that means towards the motor end. anyway. What am I looking at this view? Can't really remember. Taking a pipe off. Okay. Here's a comparison of the original pipe and the new pipe. And you can see it's got the M as well. And just the amount of muck inside, it's actually fine. Probably still very much could keep going on. So what I'm trying to show here is actually we're starting to undo the bolts for the water pump, and the majority of them are quite easy to access, but we will find later on that we found one of them to be very difficult to reach, and I think I showed that in the video earlier. Here's the new water pump, and we've got our instructions as well there just to help guide us, and just showing the bolts as well as they come off the water pump. And what we're doing there is counting how many bolts we need to take off, and I think it's 8 in total, so making sure you don't leave one behind that you cause damage. Now this is trying to show that area where actually it's really bloody hard to reach the final 8th bolt, and eventually we had to try and gain access via different means. It's quite hard to show. I'm hoping this gives an idea whereabouts it sits. It's bloody difficult to access there. So I think at this point we were trying to find other means to gain access and to that bolt, and we actually pulled that pipe off there on that plastic pump piece that I showed you earlier, and thought that might give us a bit more access to get an angle with the ratchet on that bolt. And you can see we've got some coolant that's coming out of that pipe as we've pulled it off. Remember, we need to wash that afterwards. So here's another view, and it's quite an interesting one that you can see around that bracket, the black bracket, kind of 12 o'clock there in the photo. There's a little bit of coolant residue on the block around it, and that's the bit where we had a little bit of leak. And I can also see maybe about 9 o'clock in this picture, a tiny little bit around that pipe coming in under the EGR cooler box. And that's the thing you'll want to be looking out for when you're inspecting your car, to be looking for that. It's very subtle on ours. It wasn't causing a problem. We weren't dropping coolant level significantly. Now this is just to show the size of the ratchet you'll need to get those bolts off. It's a very particular one, E8. So yeah, worth making sure you've got that. So yeah, this is, I think we decided at this point, yeah, we were trying to get that little black bracket off. Took us a while to realise that there's actually 3 bolts, and remember that little small bolt that sits around the back. We're just getting a little bit of coolant residue coming off from underneath. Again, an indicator that there has been a minor leak there. Now, you know, I mentioned the tiny spanner. This is the one. It's just about lets you get in that space to reach that final bolt that's on the back side of this piece. Remember, there's 3 bolts, 2 on the front, 1 on the back, and it's proper awkward to reach in there. It has that similar same screws you just saw in a few pictures back with the E8. But yeah, you need something that's very short. This is no longer than your middle finger, this tiny little spanner, and it saved the day. I don't know what we would have done without it. And here it is, that piece taken off. You can see that little final bolt thing on the back there, and you can see how the gasket is a little bit destroyed there with the coolant. Not destroyed, you could fix it. This the area, gave it a little clean up. I don't think it's been cleaned yet in this photo, but just to show you there what it looks like. It's quite interesting, the channels, how they go around the engine. So yeah, here we're just using very, very fine sanded grit sandpaper and just finishing off that block edge there so that the gasket on the new item will fit nicely. I've put a bit of blue towel there. Actually, I've left that bolt in on that black bracket we took off, and I'm using the blue towel just to push it forward so it doesn't fall backwards and get lost into the engine bay. Interesting, when you pull the intercooler forward, which we have done in this shot, you can see right in the center of this photo a small black hose, and that's actually how it connects. It's a push fit. And you can see that's probably another area. It's a bit better, the lighting on this. Just above the black dome of the water pump there, you can see that little hose there. Yeah, another area that I imagine could fail. And maybe that's where other people are getting problems, but there was no signs of any issues on R1 there. And if we'd known about this, we probably would have replaced it. But I'm not going to go back and do it now. There's no problems, but just to be pedantic, it would have been nice. So here's just a look at those bolts that came off. This has come off the water pump, those hex bolts. You could see the bit of corrosion, and that's what the coolant will do, and it can make them very unhappy. This is that little shim that we mentioned that we had to go on a mission to go and get. And it just helps guide the water pump when you're putting it back on. You see how we put it in the block there. 10 Newton meters torque on those bolts when you put them back. And that is before we put the item back on the water pump. It's just to show the block there. Again, gave it a little clean. I'm going to whiz through these. And there you go, new pump on. We've put the new bracket on. We're connecting the hoses, new hoses back on. Push those all in, nice shiny new hoses. Lovely jubbly. Oh, we're watering the engine bay. Got to wash that spilt coolant off. And here's putting the belt on. So yeah, you can see how tight it is to get that belt on. And I don't think I took a photo of it, but I actually, rather than trying to get it over the alternator there, I changed the plan and had it so that I could slip that last bit over the harmonic pulley. Oh look, it's the power steering, that last one that I didn't know earlier. But that's the diagram, so you've got to make sure you get it all in the right direction, and please double check it before you start the car. You don't want that going wrong. And here's that vacuum pump that we were mentioning, how to prime the coolant system by creating a vacuum, and then it means that there's no air pockets in the system, and it will also suck through the coolant when you're ready back into the system. And it is the best way to make sure you don't get any airlocks anywhere. It actually is very simple to use when you know how. We were just a bit rusty using it. Here's the air compressor, just if anyone's interested. It's very affordable. I don't know how much it is. It's not mine. But I gather it is something that might be worth investing in if you are into having a garage stocked up with these sorts of things. Here's the instructions of how to do it. Looks complicated. It isn't. But there you go. There we are, making our mix of coolant, deionized water. So we use 5 litres of each, coolant 5 litres, and deionized water 5 litres. And that's just the instructions of how to finish it off. Here's that Arctic Silver BMW paint for that front bumper. Wheel on the right is original, left is respray. That's my respraying process. Just getting there. And yeah, I don't know if I've got much else. Oh yeah, that's the paint, if anyone's interested.